are you for or against? And sure enough, the people fall automatically into the two categories and get all head up and bothered and argue over the radio about what side they're joining on whatever issue that these gossip jockeys dish up for us. Manufactured reality. Very few people can stop and stand silence anymore. They've done surveys now, and they find that so many people cannot sleep without the radio or the television going. Many city people can't stand silence in the country because they've never had it before. They've never lived in an environment with a lack of noise and machinery and traffic. They've adapted. They've become comfortable with the environment that they've grown up in. And yet only when you're alone and away from it all can you work through all the nonsense. Only then do things become clear, because you're thinking for yourself. A unique thing to do today. Maybe a dangerous thing to do today as well. Because we're not supposed to think for ourselves. That's why you have such a massive culture creation industry, as it's always been called by the elite. Massive. To give you your thoughts for every minute of every hour when you're awake, so that you don't think for yourself. We're not supposed to notice that we're being sprayed like bugs from the skies, going on unabated. And the major media, that everyone will run after the major media and their topics. The major media won't even mention that. Why would you trust them on anything else? But the people do. And they do because they cannot imagine that professional people and well-known authors that come on television and news debates, etc., could be possibly lying to this extent to keep the public in the dark. Because they themselves could not do that. They can't imagine anybody else could. That's how simple this whole thing is. The elite have always done this. Meanwhile, we're destroying the last few countries that have hung on to their old ways and have not got along with the central bankers, etc., to democratize them, bring them democracy. Ancient Rome used to go across Europe claiming they were bringing civilization to the barbarians. Then they brought the money to the system with them and introduced it to the public, and after a generation, the ones who grew up thought it was normal, and it was taxed back from them in their labor. It's a beautiful con game, money. The first trick in the book, money. Not the abuse of money, money period. It can't help but cause abuse and greed and destruction. Without money, no one could get an army together to go against anyone else. The ancient Phoenicians are an interesting people. Although they're called the first main traders, they were not the first. We know that there were people before them trading between parts of India and Sumer, and it's as far back as we were given as history. But the Phoenicians used to come into countries with alcohol of all kinds, exotic fruits, etc., and drugs, and manufactured linen, things that the people didn't need at the time, the new countries they went into, and they would anchor offshore. And then, just before dark, a rowing boat would go in, and they'd set a fire up on the beach, and put some of their glittering little trinkets down, and some alcohol. And they made beer back then too. Even the ancient Egyptians drank it. The bureaucrats even had about a gallon each per day as a quota. So they leave the alcohol on the beach, the trinkets, and they go back to the main boat and watch. And sure enough, the more adventurous ones would come forward cautiously and go to the fire. The women would come to pick up the necklaces and so on, and then they start drinking the alcohol. Then the sign language and the shouting would happen between the boat and the shore, and eventually they'd come in there and join the party. And they would come back every so often and trade for goods from these people, or furs, or anything at all. And once they'd done it enough times and got the people stuck on their baubles and trinkets and linens, etc., then they would introduce the money and only accept that again in return. Then they'd send their money man in to distribute the money and to handle the money. This was a known science at that time. And he who controls the money and distributes it and takes it back again and fixes the rate runs you. You have no say in the matter at all. And yet a price is just someone's idea. That's all. And once the Phoenicians had, after a generation even, the long-term planners had got the system going in different places, they would put that little place into debt. It could be a village even. Come in to sort it out, just like a bankruptcy. And then they would set up their factory towns. Factory towns, 2,500 years ago. Where everybody in the town lived in a habitat area. Sound familiar? Making certain things that these merchants would then take for peanuts and trade elsewhere. And they had strings of these factory towns, habitat areas, self-contained little townships. It's such a coincidence to see the same thing already written up in the United Nations Agenda 21, the agenda for the 21st century, where we all live very happily under this sort of unelected bureaucracy in little habitat areas, and all have our own functions for work that will be decided for us. Isn't that pleasant? We don't have to wonder about things. It's all planned for us. Boy, that's good for lazy people. So nothing ever changes. The same techniques are used down through the millennia, over and over and over again. And the reason they don't teach that so much in history now is because they don't want you to know that these are old games that are being pulled over and over. The same ones. And if you find out the outcomes in the last merry-go-round of the same game, you'll know where it's going with this one. And you might object. So they don't teach it in school anymore. In fact, they don't teach terribly much in school, except political correctness. Money is a key to the system. Once it's accepted as our normal creation, even though very few people even understand it. And let's be honest, if you can't understand something that runs your life and everybody else's life, it can hire thousands of men to go into an army and go and kill you or kill other people. If you don't understand something so basic, then you know it's a con game. They try to wrap up cons with science. Any science that makes itself a profession does one thing right away. It creates new words, new terminology, so that those outside the profession can't understand it. whether it's medicine or anything else. There's always a con involved. You don't say you've got the cold in medicine, you've got coiza. The common cold is coiza, you see. That kind of thing. And back to money, it's the same thing there. Back in the 1970s, a documentary was aired on the BBC in England, and it documented different ex-professors and economists came out openly and said the whole doctrine of economists was utter nonsense, utter rubbish. It wasn't even a pseudoscience with its ups and downs and cycles, etc. It's all utter nonsense.